cuff him to the bed. One guy had just been like shot and had blasted out, but he said it's the best place to learn because they got all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, all the wild things.
And they don't have a choice.
Yeah, basically.
What are we gonna do, run away?
Are we back in Exodus today?
We are back in Exodus. Where am I finding?
I'm super stoked. I love Exodus.
We need to tell Ron about Tim and John, especially right now going through the testing.
I slept weird last night. I'm at that age, speaking of age. I slept weird last night, now my back isn't functioning right.
Oh, those are left over from the session.
Okay.
That was my devotional.
I remembered it too. I was like, I've seen it before. Yeah, on PowerPoint, I've seen this. I was like, oh yeah.
I'm just gonna try to get it with the camera and we'll figure it out.
Okay. You ready to go? We gotta go to the bathroom. When they get done. Are we ready? So, good morning, welcome. We have journeyed back to Exodus. We got done with our knowing Christ section, which I'm really glad we did, because going back and reading this now and just knowing more about Jesus, I kind of understand this more. You get a deeper understanding. So it made the commandments and the radical, how we talked about Jesus being radical, the way he did it. And I look at the commandments now, God, some of these commandments, like making time sacred, one God, was a really radical concept at this time. So it's kind of like, that's pretty funny, is that Jesus was very radical and did stuff different. God did everything different. So it's like he never changed, it's the same pattern, just there's no true God, Old Testament God, New Testament God. He's still the same thing, does the same thing all the way through, which I never realized until, this. So I kind of got and took that hiatus. So where we left off in the Ten Commandments, quick recap. So Moses is 80. He's for 80 years old. We were talking about age earlier. He's pretty good. He goes up and down this mountain 4 times. So it's not an easy climb. So you go talk to God. So the people have all consecrated themselves. They're at the bottom of the mountain. The pillar of cloud is over the mountain. There's thunder and lightning. So the people are on the bottom and they're scared to death. So Moses goes up into this cloud and the Lord is talking to him and basically giving the commandments. He gives the commandments and then the laws and a bunch of stuff. So the Ten Commandments are basically the 10 principles. And then all the Jewish law, you get into Leviticus and Numbers and Exodus, is kind of the case law off all these principles. Let's see. Okay, so over the laws we talked about, first and foremost, you have no other God except for me. So that's, right there, that's just a radical concept of the day. Everyone had multiple gods. There were gods for everyone. Remember in Egypt, they had a god of the river, god of the harvest, god of the skies, god that brought up the sun, god that brought up the night. So there's one God, and this is the only civilization that worships one God. So that was a very radical concept. And he demonstrated his power. He basically annihilated Egypt. All their economy, everything. And then at the end, he annihilates the army crossing the Red Sea. So God said, you have one God, he demonstrated it, that was him. And then he said, you shall make no other images to me. And everyone had an image. Everything, God pretty much had an icon. And the icon, I'm supposed to worship the icon, but it points to the symbol. But as with man, over time, the icon becomes what people are worshiping, and you forget what the icon represents. They had that with Nihatun, the serpent staff in Numbers. So people were getting bitten by snakes, and they're saying, hey, people are getting bitten by snakes and dying, we need something. So God told Moses, make a staff of a serpent, put it on a rod, and put it up. So when you get bit by a snake, you look at the snake, and God's going to heal you. And it wasn't the staff healed you, it was you have faith in God through this stage. Your faith in God, you look at it, you pray, and you're going to get healed. So it was kind of an icon pointing to God for healing. But then you see in 1 Kings 18:1, that staff was inside the temple, and the king broke it and shattered it because people were burning incense to it and worshiping the staff. So it was something intended to heal, but became tradition and locked in, and over the times it became something people worship. So it took you away from God. And then the third one is, thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. So, and it's really not vain, it means empty. So God is a sacred name, right? God is the God of everything, and we need to respect that. And a lot of times, I see it at work, a lot of times guys, you see, gee this, and this, and it really bothers me. I see it on TV, and we use it so, it's like common language, and it really needs to be respect. If you go to the Islam language, they don't put up with that. It's a sacred name, respect. And I think that's one of the problems with Christian. Once you start losing respect for something, it's easier to go down. It loses its significance. Let's see. And then the fourth one, keep the Sabbath and keep it holy. So again, this is a radical concept. Time is sacred. He said, you shall work 6 days, and on the 7th you shall rest. Same thing for the field, right? You shall sow a field for 7 years, take a year off, and let the ground rest. It's also showing that you have faith in me, that I'm going to take care of you, because you don't have to work 7 days. And it's really good for our health. If you work every day, long hours, you're going to get stressed out. You're going to not perform at your best. So God makes time sacred. And it's a day you worship God and have faith in Him. Then we got down to honor your father and mother. So this was one, we had a really good discussion on this. And this is something kind of lost in America and culture. Most cultures we talked about, family name is first, right? You are your family's representative, you are the name. That's why you see Jesus of Nazareth. That was kind of their last name, where you were from. So it was Jesus. Because if you're in the local thing, it's Jesus, son of Joseph, would be how you identify. But if you're traveling around and no one knows who Joseph is, it's Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, so I'm from Nazareth. But the name means something in the family, and it's kind of a thing. If the parents follow the law, we obey the law, we do what we're supposed to do, we're going to be pretty solid parents. And then we teach the kids. And I think that's why we lose our disconnect is if you sin, it goes down to it goes down to the 4th and 5th generation. It's our kids follow us. I see Giada reacts the same way I do. Viviana's even starting to do it now. You see your kids, and especially your parents, like, that's you, and point the other. That's all you right there. And then that's the way she reacts. But we're their first things they see, and they're going to model. I mean, he's even, when I was getting married, dating Linda, that's what the guys told me. Well, if you really want to know how it's going to be, observe the mother. And you see the mother, and the mother-in-law's great, and everything, you're going to be good, because that's going to do it. I even see myself doing stuff my dad did. And I see, like, my sister doing stuff my mom did. It's pretty funny, we talk, I'm like, she'll make certain sounds and do something like, that's just like mom. So it's funny, you don't see it, but I'm starting to see it now. It's like, dang, that's something my dad would do, and it's there for you. So if you have a good influence and you're good parents and you do it, your kids are going to be well. If you don't, it's very hard, right? There's a lot of abuse. That's the problem with domestic abuse, right? That's the way my father did it, I did it, and it keeps continuing down generationally, and it's hard to break that cycle.
Just think what that would be, Jesus of Nazareth, what would we all be? Ryan of the body of Christ. Ryan of Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
That actually is kind of cool.
And God even says that too in here, that God, may your days be long. And of course, honoring them keeps the balance between people. And he even goes to the extent that if a kid gets in a fight with their parents, you're supposed to take the kid and go stone them. So it was a very sacred thing. And I think we see that with Jesus. He's teaching, everything Jesus does is about God. Why do you call me good? Only my Father is good. Everything I do is for them. So everything Jesus is doing is honoring God, and he's doing something for God. So I think that's why one of the things I realized is kind of what he was talking about, is you're doing stuff for God and living that example. And Jesus was all about, this is the way you should do it, this is what being like God. So that's a very important law. We kind of pass over that commandment, but it's a very important commandment to do. And then we get, so now we're picked up, that's where we ended up left, we're on, you shall not murder. So, what do we think thou shalt not murder means today?
Well, I think Jesus made himself pretty clear in Matthew 5, which is, kind of nightmarish, really. Because he doesn't even,
Is that if you're angry with your brother, you've already killed him in your heart?
Yeah, and it even says, hold on, it gets ridiculous. It says, you shall not murder. Whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So, it's like, if you kind of think somebody's stupid, that's the same thing as murder. And that is...
Well, because what is murder? It's destroying a life, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess, really Jesus taking that to the nth degree is like you're destroying somebody, maybe not physically, but with your words.
Well, words speak life and they can speak death. If you use your words in a way that's going to bring life and joy to other people, then, their lives are going to be better. But we've all been hurt by someone who spoke a word that wasn't kind to us, and some people even, it has ruined their lives, depending on the scale. But so I think it's pretty important. But yeah, it's the gravity hits us. We're like, oh my gosh, because I get angry and probably think in my head 100 times a day, that person, and then I'm like, I gotta back up and be like, oh, I'm no better. And so it's really humbling, I think.
Well, one thing too, there's several words for murder in Hebrew. Just like today, there's not just murder isn't murder, there's accidental homicide, there's a whole different step. And what God's referring to here is the premeditated, unlawful taking of human. So, and the Beatitudes, one thing about Jesus, he's not saying you have to go to this extreme. But this murder, this is the last event in a series leading up to it. So if someone slept with your wife and you're really angry and you found out and you just, it starts off with that. You find out, you get that feeling of anger, that anger turns to rage, and then it goes to that point to, you take someone's life.
Well, we always tell our kids, sin moves from your head to your heart to your hands.
Yes.
That's the path it travels. You get a little thing in your head, and then before you know it, you've convinced yourself in your heart that it's true, and then once you've convinced yourself something's true, you will most certainly act on it, whether you mean to or not.
And that's what the Beatitudes are all for. It's not, if something happens, if you're angry at your brother, you've sinned. Stop it there. Same with adultery. Adultery isn't something, for the most part, I want to wake up and just adultery. It's something that you meet a person at work, relationship builds over time, and then it happens. If you have that thought, cut it off then and there, like you say, and then you stop it going from your heart to your hands. And that's what the Beatitude part, and here, this is what he's talking about.
And I think for us today, it's of particular importance because we live in a culture that makes profit off of our outrage. And I would say particularly in Christian cultures, both the church and the culture at large profits off of our outrage. And so I think we need to be ever more cautious about taking those thoughts captive so that we don't end up hating our brothers and in so many ways, offending this particular commandment that seems really extreme, but is really not that far off.
And there's a lot more case law. Like I say, chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments. But you go to 21 to 23, and we're going to explore that. I think that's what people do. They see, thou shalt not murder. And killing, period, is thing. But if you read the rules of it, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. So for instance, Exodus 21, if you have Bibles, 21, 12 to 14. It said, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie and wait for him, but God let him fall into his hands, then I will appoint for you a place to which you may flee. So basically he's saying if you need to strike him and kill him, you put to death. But if it's, you're drinking, get in a fight, and you accidentally hit him and he dies, it's not intentional murder. They created little cities where you can go be safe. So if someone killed my brother and I'm angry and I want to seek revenge, you can't touch him there, or then you're committing, So you start reading into the thing, and then 18 to 20. When a man quarrels and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoor with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have the time thoroughly healed. So if you don't kill him, you have to compensate him. So there's a whole lot of little sequence and case laws, examples God gives to, in this situation, in this situation. So it's not just thou shalt not murder, it's, and then 32, if an ox goes with a slave or a male female, the owner shall give it to the master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So it goes in here, if your oxen kills someone, breaks out of the fence, and it'll say, if you intentionally know this oxen attacks people and you let it go and it kills someone, that's like you committing murder, you know better. But if once the oxen attacks, if it's not, you put that ox to death and you compensate that person. So there's lots of accidental homicides, and there's lots of little nuances, and Leviticus goes even more into it. So, like I said, these are the 10 principles, but people read them and take them as, it's this. It's like, no, you need to read the 21 to 23, read Leviticus, and that kind of gives you the overall what God means. So the next commandment is, you shall not commit adultery. This is one pretty rampant in the United States. There's a 50% divorce. I forgot what the percent was of those are adulterer divorces. So this is like the thought process of murder, right? You don't wake up and say, I'm going to have adultery today. I'm just going to do it. It's something that happens over time. Most of the time it's a work colleague or Jesus said in his beatitude, if you look at a woman and you have lust in your heart, you committed adultery. He's not saying you've literally committed adultery. He's saying cut it off right then and there so it doesn't go any further. So what do you think this means today? And how can we help others with this? There's always been a situation where that person, he's kind of mentioned he's up to no good, and to you it's, do I say something, do I not? I had a friend that, took a picture, said, hey, can you look and see if this truck's here? I was like, you don't want to get involved or get any of that, so how do we handle that situation today? What's y'all's opinion? Get involved, don't get involved? Because to me, I feel you're supposed to say something, you know, if you care for both people, it's like, what do you do? But you don't want to be the cause, you know, if you can very easily become, oh, it's your, you know, they don't want to blame each other or ignore, so you become the focus of everybody's anger. So what do y'all think? What do y'all do today?
If that were somebody that I knew, I would call them out. I mean, because that's destroying an entire family. And I don't care if they hate me for the rest of their life. I will do what it takes. They can hate me. I mean, you know what I mean? Whether it's your man friend or your girlfriend, whatever. I mean, that destroys families and it doesn't stop. I mean, that hurt and that pain never ends. And it's just, I think that may be part of our problem is we won't say anything. And we like, well, that's, you know, boys will be boys, men will be men. He's always been that way. She's whatever. And I think, now there's also circumstances that'll lead to that. But if you know about those circumstances within that marriage, whether it be abuse or, I don't know, whatever, I just think we need to be more, if they're truly our friends and people that we love, then we must be willing to love them, even if it means losing them.
That's interesting. I think that, so your concern is about your relationship with the person. I thought there was a different kind of angle that, based on something you said just earlier, that it made me think how the divorce rate is so high in the U.S. So one concern I'd have is I wouldn't worry about the relationship personally either. I think that's wouldn't give me pause, but knowing that it could so easily lead to divorce, and that's a problem where you should be able to point out an issue and not have that concern. I would be a little worried because of how devastating that is to divorce. You know, people are too quick to jump to divorce here. You know, it should be something that the problem's acknowledged and you should work it out. You know, that it's a problem in itself, but then, you know, divorce is a problem. It's just because that'll destroy the child's life in ways we don't think about either.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, I agree with both of y'all, and I like how you said I would call them out. I think, like, if it was one of my friends, I mean, I hope they wouldn't do it, but we do all make mistakes, but I think I would probably go to the person who did it first, and I would talk to them, and I would call them out, you know, and be like, I think if they come clean to their partner or whatever they did, you know, it's better, even if you end up being there, as long as, like, if you can change your brother's mind, I remember Jesus saying that, then you've gained your brother. So if we could get that person to come clean and deal with the consequences, the marriage is more likely to be saved if that person isn't, like, defensive. So I wouldn't just go to the other person and, like, tell them and then it started a thing. I would go to that person, and then if that person, you know, doesn't come clean, then eventually, you know, you would need to, like, but that way you're giving that person a chance to take responsibility, and maybe you gain, like, more friendship, like they trust you, both of them, you know. Because you might be closer to the guy, like you might have a guy friend and you met the girl through the guy, but that's his wife, right? So you have that closer relationship with the guy, but you care about the girl. So, like, you know what I mean? So I agree with what you said, I would call out, but I think I would probably call it out to the person first and then.
And that's what I meant.
Well, I figured, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
I get really up in arms about adultery. Sorry.
Yeah, oh no,
It bothers me.
It's true. And I think also whenever, and I don't think people do this enough, but like when you get married, like you really need to like communicate expectations and realize that when you're getting married and you're standing before God and your congregation or the people that you care about, you're making a vow. And like when me and my husband got married, I told him, I was like, my only ways I will get divorced, if you are unfaithful, I won't be able to trust you, and most likely that would end to divorce. Obviously, I would hope that we could work out, but he would never do that. I firmly believe that, so obviously. Or abuse. Because if you hit me or you abuse me, most likely you're going to do it to my child. My dad was like that with my mom and then us. So those would be my only two things. And of course I talk to God about it too. Like, but I think divorce is, like you said, like it's just kind of, oh, it's a way out. Like people don't take it seriously until it ruins the lives.
Maybe that's the point, like you said, calling them out, because you don't realize
I-
all you're actually affecting. It's more about you, you know, in that moment. You're not, that person might not realize that. Do you really look at the long-term ramifications
Yeah.
for this, for what you're doing to children, to this, and that's a good point.
There's no long-term ramification thought in
in those things.
adultery.
I think that's the thing. That's where I think we have to go back to what Jesus said in the Beatitudes, and we have to disciple people better to see people as representatives, as the Imago Dei, the image of God.
Amen.
Because I don't think, listen, my mom has been divorced 3 times, all 3 of them ended in adultery. Twice was on her, once was on the person she was married to. I have lived this many times. By the time somebody has committed adultery, they don't really care what you say.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate it. I think we should say things. But I think the church needs to do a better job. I think we make a lot of rules, and the rules are good and the boundaries are good. Men and women can't be alone in these circumstances. We make all these, and those are good. But the heart of the matter is we continue to behave in this way because we see people as objects to ends. Whether it's to fill this love void inside of us that is really meant to be filled by Jesus. Our partner cannot do that, no matter how great they are. You're so good, love you. But they can't do that. They can't fill that void for you. And I don't know that the church does a spectacular job of communicating that your partner cannot fill that void, that marriage is not the be-all, end-all to the Christian life, and that ultimately it's not just in sexual relationships, it's in all relationships. If you cannot see somebody as Imago Dei, you will end up committing a sin against them. Maybe it's murder, maybe it's adultery. Those are really just 2 ends of the exact same problem, and that is that you do not see this person as created in the image of God. And so I think from a very young age, we need to start, pointing out people as created in the image of God. And so often we don't do that. We just lay down rules and boundaries without the underpinning of the theology of it. And then it becomes just a rule. And then it becomes, well, it's not that big of a deal. I can be forgiven for this. And you can. So I don't want to, undermine the redemptive act of it either. Obviously, y'all have all met my mom. We have a good relationship, but it took a long time. So I do believe there's redemption for that. But I think this starts, I think that was the whole point of the stuff Jesus said in the Beatitude, is this starts so much earlier. And it comes from so much of a deeper place that we have to stop saying, like, this is the rule, follow the rule. We have to gird people with the underpinnings of what God truly meant by these rules. And that was to honor the fact that he didn't create other creatures in his image. He created humans in his image and as his representatives. And if we taught young men, it's not that you shouldn't have sex until you're married, but that this woman is an image bearer of God, then perhaps earlier on in life they can start seeing them as something other than desire fulfillers. And the same holds true for women. And so I think that that's the importance of sort of underpinning a lot of these, especially the second half of the 10 Commandments with the Beatitudes, is Jesus is trying to get at the heart of something. I mean, we can call people out all day long, but I will tell you what, by the time they have made it that far, it's mostly done. They've mostly convinced themselves that they're right and it's okay. And I think this is where just slow and steady, lifelong discipleship serves us really, really well.
I would agree with that.
Are you Michael Terry?
She got it.
I know, right? Nothing else needs to be said there.
Yeah.
Alright, what about Robin? What about you? I mean, probably none of your friends are married yet. What with like boyfriends and girlfriends? Is that the same, or is that? I mean, what's the, perspective for younger adults?
Yeah, for younger adults. I guess the same. I mean, I think, it's pretty well known, like, you probably, shouldn't cheat on your significant other. But I feel like the way that I've had to deal with this is, it it's kind of this battle of like, do I tell her or no? And I think in our culture, it's a lot of like, you gotta pick like whether or not you are gonna defend like your person that you know or a person that you may not know. Like if you see something and like, for instance, like there's this recent situation where my friend saw one of my close friends' boyfriend's Tinder account active like in our town and they live somewhere else. And like, it's kind of that thing where it's like, this is gonna crush her and I don't wanna have to say something, but like I will. It ended up being like a weird situation, like someone was like using his account or something like that because he didn't have any of them downloaded, which is like good. But it's kind of like you do have to kind of like do your justice and like defend the victim, I think, in that case. So that's just how I see it. Like I guess like in the dating world, it's kind of like defend the victim and like do your best to let them know.
It's interesting you bring up Tinder because that I'm not that familiar with it, but I understand the concept.
My goodness.
That brings in, I mean, you talk about the availability to cheat and or commit adultery, just like.
So I would love to hear how you handle that with your students because listen, we don't have to live in that world, but we're having to raise kids in that. I'm like not that far.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the way that we do see this played out is like, and I feel like people, especially like on social media and like especially with, my kids are all like 15, 16, it's kind of the like emotional cheating is still cheating, like physical cheating is the same as like even just the possibility, and so it's just a lot of like, if this guy is talking to this girl, it's still cheating. If this guy is like, if you like see that, it's so hard to be like, oh my gosh, I just saw my boyfriend like on Tinder, on like my friend just saw him on Bumble, and like it's like not even like the like you can see the conversation, like it's not even like actual like physical adultery as like we would know before. It's like there's so much accessibility to just like the simplest, like somebody acts on something and it's so easy because it's all online. And
So interesting because I read that like the rates of teen like being sexually active are dropping like rocks. Like it's just going so far down, but experts were like, actually this feels like it should be a good thing and it's not, because then like it turns out they're just getting so much more emotionally entangled in all sorts of weird relationships that it's a mess. So that's really interesting.
Person anymore, it's all
It's all online.
The common denominator of all of this is social media. No matter what.
I think it also goes back to what you said though, like they don't see a person,
Yeah, and I can see how like being on your phone would complicate that.
Let's look at the way they treat like in music and women. Like women are like, we're supposed to be respected, guys are supposed to respect us, but I used to go to the club. I didn't think of it then, but I think in the 90s you heard the whole
What? They don't respect women at the club?
So I'm like, these same girls that are saying this, y'all are out there dancing, kicking your butt, to the guy basically being derogatory towards women, treating you like that, and it's, what do you expect? If you say this, you should, but yet you're accepting something or listening to something, so you start turning into your dad, you say, I listen to that, but, but it's just like, music, it's everything that this is your image you want to be.
Well, and what she said, I really loved it. Like, if we saw everybody in the image of God, then it wouldn't matter what the relationship, because I found it interesting when she was saying that it might not to some people look like cheating, but if you're with somebody and then you're talking to another girl and it's probably not, like even if you're not directly, like I know if my guy was talking to another girl and it seemed a little bit, weird or whatever, that would be a slight, I would still feel sinned against, even though the action wasn't sexual, but I would feel like if he saw me in the image of God, he would be more likely to take into account my feelings and not do that and not go that way. So if we just, like she said, saw that as people in all of our relationships, we'd be less likely to just use them as an object. And that goes for guys and girls. I really like that. I wrote it down.
All right, any more comments on that one? Okay. You shall not steal. This is
Try.
I did not put anything. So you shall not steal, right? It's pretty, so what is stealing today?
Taxes.
Wait a second.
Are you talking about the government taking from us, or are you taking from the government?
Yeah, that's so, and how does that apply to our lives today? What do you consider stealing today? And taxes is the one thing I knew, I was like, what's it?
Someone's gonna say it.
I echo it. I have that sentiment.
I think time is one that we see,
Yeah.
that we don't see, or you don't think of as being thievery.
That's one thing that, as I've gotten older, I've really started to value my time more and more. Like, I used to waste so much time on things, on things and on people, and like the first thing to come to my mind is just buying the car again, buying Amy's minivan. Like 5 years ago, I would have just fought and fought and fought and fought and fought. And now it's like, okay, I mean, if you're not gonna give me what I want, then I'm not gonna waste your time, I'm not gonna waste my time, it's just not there. And just walk. So, you know, it goes both ways, especially with time. Like, I'm not gonna waste your time, but I'm also not gonna let you waste my time, because that's stealing from both of us. And time is the most valuable resource we have, because you can't get it back. Like, objects are replaceable, money is replaceable, but time and people aren't.
Amen.
So your experience with the car, you feel like would be someone was breaking that commandment? Or you're just speaking of an abstract idea?
In the context of time, you know, one of the tactics that dealerships use is to just stall and wear you down, and you know, the more fed up you get, you know, say you have to have this car, and they'll just beat you down and stall to get you mentally weary, so that at the end of it you're just like, okay, fine, I want to get it over with, just get me to the point where I can sign my name, and take advantage of you through that with your money. So yeah, in that regard, it is stealing time.
But to the level of you think it's breaking a commandment?
Well, let's see what God says. We have some case law. Chapter 21.
I like looking at it in that way.
So, God says in 21:16, whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. So it could be people. 22:1 says, if a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. And then 3-4 says, but if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold, for he is a thief. And if the stolen beast is found alive in the possession, whether an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. So pretty much in Jesus' day, if you stole, you couldn't pay it back tenfold or fourfold, you became that guy's slave. And so it's pretty, the penalties for this are pretty significant.
So basically, you have to pay for your money with time.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Or you can't pay 4 times as much. And in 7-13 says, if a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he put his hands to the neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox or for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God, the one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox or a sheep, or any beast to keep safe and it dies, and is injured or driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both, whether or not he has put his hand on his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution for the owner. If it is tore by beasts, let him bring it to evidence, and he shall not make restitution. So you can see here, even if you're keeping something safe and steal it, there's a punishment to be doled out. So it is, God's pretty, it's a pretty big deal. We see it as something little, but God says in that one, it doesn't matter if it's a cloak, it matters to God. So it kind of got me thinking, it's like, God, taxes, even though you're supposed to obey the government, and, I look at the big thieves today, like Chip said in his sermon, that bank melt statement. These offers you get in to do these offers, especially young kids who don't know any better, is thievery. And it's, to me, it's like, well, I'm supporting that bank or have, money at that bank, I'm supporting these, companies ripping off people. So.
Well, and we got in I have no idea how it happened. We got in a conversation with our kids about contracts last night, and they were like, how do people trick you into contracts? And I was like, well, y'all couldn't, because you're kids, so like it would be void anyways. And we were telling them though, like primarily it's elderly people who get tricked into contracts. Like they get stolen from more than anybody else, and I mean that's it. It's just it's taking what's not yours to take.
It's a manipulation. I think what I was getting at with the car is the stealing of time is more a manipulation of a mindset than that leads to stealing. You're preying on someone's wants and desires, or you're preying on someone's, with elderly people, needs, or perhaps a more feeble mind because of age. You're seeing this gap in the armor, so to speak, and taking advantage of people with that.
So getting something through a form of manipulation, would we consider that stealing? I guess is the question.
If it's not right.
I mean, I would, but I'm just asking the group.
I think it's really difficult because, it's just, I guess what it boils down to, a lot of these were tangible items, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes intangible. So it's a lot more abstract and iffy when you start getting into that. When you said that, then I thought, well, people have stolen my happiness too, It's a slippery stuff. Like at one point.
It is, but it's also not necessarily wrong. I mean, I tell like kids all the time, like, just because you will have something someday, if you take it now and it's not your time, then you stole it. So like, for example, I have a daughter who is obsessed with getting to wear makeup. She is not of age to be wearing makeup yet, but she's completely obsessed with it. And so, like upon occasion, she will sneak makeup-like products when she is not supposed to, and that's stealing. I'm like, listen, I love you. You will get to do this someday, but it's out of time right now. So basically the thing you're stealing is the time. And makeup, really. But it's a time factor more than an object factor, because it will be hers, it just isn't right now. And so I think the time does play, when you take something out of its time, you're also stealing, even if it's to be yours anyways.
The intangible thing, I look at it as I think it's super important, but as a society, we don't have compensation necessarily for it. But either way, for you, someone manipulating your time or stealing it away from you was an offense.
Oh, like you said with the Tinder account. So that's the thing, though, we live in such an intangible society. Do we not count identity theft as stealing?
It definitely is.
It's stealing.
But it's just the intangible, it's still stealing. We don't have compensation for it, or you don't go to prison. Identity theft, obviously, yes. But, that kind of thing. But it's still an offense to your brother. And so that's still a sin. So maybe it's not quote unquote stealing tangible items, but if you still have offended your brother, you still have to somehow fix that.
Let me read a couple more verses.
It's deep.
It kind of goes into, we talked about tangible, right, but what about the intangible? So God says in 21, you shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cries, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. So this is not just tangible things, mistreating,
Or offense, yeah.
illegal or elderly. I think this falls in that realm, those people that target the elderly. God here is saying, I will avenge them if
Yeah.
they come back. So
again, I think the good thing to do is the same thing we did with murder and adultery, and say like, what's at the root of this? Well, it's greed. So no matter what, like if it's tangible or intangible, if the root of it's greed, then the fruit is
Yeah.
stealing.
So I like that. If I was one, I guess my concern is for me. I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, but I have to analyze if the root of my action is something nefarious, then it's bad. My concern is if we rely on the victim, so to speak, to tell you, you have stolen my time. Because I could have done something with one person and it's subjective. They said, that's not stealing my time. And I did the same thing to another guy and he says, you've stolen my time. Now I'm relying on that person's reaction to define if I was right or wrong. And that's dangerous to me. But so if you go back to the person, how do I feel? Was my intention to do something bad? That I can work with. Because I know in my heart what my intention was.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that nails it. Because I'm in sales, and I have to battle that sometimes. Like, my job is to generate more sales, and there are often times where I could manipulate a situation where a guy's ignorant to like the process. He's like, well, how many of these do I need? I could probably, in fact, I know I could. Well, you need one on every so many acres, and I have to battle that because that's my job, to get more. But then I'm like, that's not what I would do. Like, if this was me, this is how many I would put out. And so I have to always go back to that motivation. Like, what am I here for?
But see, that's exactly it. You're doing that, and you're thinking, okay, this is me. I want to do to others as I would want done to me.
But it's
you
a battle.
Still, yeah,
but
it is. You still want
it's a battle.
to generate
My
sales,
greed
but-
comes in too. Like,
Yeah.
if I sell more, we make more. Blah, blah, blah. My boss is happy. Everybody's happy. Except for the person I sold to.
In sales, I would think, like, say, like when you were saying the car, if you go to buy a car, I mean, it takes a long time. And yes, if you go in there and you say, this is what I want, and if you're not going to back down, there's going to be no negotiations, and you see they're trying to get you down, then yeah, you just walk away. And then you saved your time, and you saved them from even offending you, basically. Because they might not, time, since it's so intangible, and because it's common knowledge that taking a car can be, or like buying a car can be like extremely
Yeah, the
tedious.
process takes a while.
Yeah. So if the person doesn't come to you, because we don't always tell each other if, like, say you offended me or saying, I bet you more people have offended me than I've actually told them they've offended me. So unless I go to that person, unless you know it's wrong, that you did something wrong, if I don't go to you and tell you, hey, I feel a little slighted or offended by this, that person might not know, because they might not be looking with the same perspective. So until you tell that person, like for what you were saying, it's not necessarily on that person, because we grew up different, cultures are different, all that kind of stuff. So in business stuff, I think it's slightly different because there's different expectations. But like in relationships, if you were like my best friend and I knew time was really important to you, quality time, whatever, and I did something that directly stole time away from you, and you came to me, that I think would be legitimate. Or even indirectly, if you came to me, I'd be like, oh wow, I'm so sorry, I never meant to do that. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of, but I think it's different in like close relationships versus business. That's my opinion.
And ultimately, one thing about stealing is lack of faith in God. And that's ultimately, I think no matter what you're stealing, time, whatever, if you're the one doing the stealing, I think that's the bigger thing, is you do not trust God to take care of you. And ultimately, that's what we get with the Sabbath. God's saying, trust in me, I will take care of you. Might not be what we want, might not be the way you imagine it, but God will take care of you.
Well, and I think this is a harder conversation in this room because of all of our socioeconomic situations. We are not in a place where we're going to steal bread or cows, like what, you know what I mean, whatever. We're all in a place where, like, if we're going to have this struggle, it's going to be some sort of probably like white collar situation. And so it feels a little different having this discussion in this room with this group of people than it would, somewhere else with a different group. of people.
Yeah, I mean, this is weird for me because I don't quite think of myself as the same socioeconomic as everybody else in this room. I'll admit that I'm totally not, and I'm probably on the way lower end, but I'm also not like Aladdin where I have to go steal with my monkey a piece of bread to survive, But my mom growing up, we were so poor. I remember, she would tell me the story about how one winter we were in this building, she had to keep us warm kind of by a lantern light. I was really little, but she struggled so much, but she never stole. She went to the women's shelter. She went somewhere to get help, and people did help her and everything. So for me, not having a good father role model, having God teach me himself basically what it means to be provided for and stuff, even in the midst of real poverty, was a big thing for me. And so, I feel the need when you're to the point where you have a real need of I want to eat, and you steal. I feel for that person, and I think that someone should help them, obviously, but being also in the place of integrity and being hey, I'm just gonna have faith and try to go to a place, because there are places you can get help, So that's my thought on that. Sorry, I think I went off.
So especially when you're reading the case laws, I find it interesting because I feel like in these laws there's some type of equilibrium that God expects. So if something's taken, then you'll restore it plus some more because of the heinous of the action itself. So there's always payback, establish justice. So there's always that kind of sense. And steal is the same, but didn't Jesus say, someone takes this, give this to that person? And didn't you, a couple weeks ago, say, you're not stolen of anything if you're not that mindset.
If it's not yours.
Yeah.
To begin with,
if
which it's not
yours, then you're not really being stolen. So,
That
that
goes back to
juxtaposition where it's, okay, everything has to be established, but then,
That's more confusing.
huh?
That makes it more confusing.
Yeah, but it's this. So now that you said that,
Yeah.
right? So it's the relationship in Christianity, as I understand it, is a relationship between oneself and God. And you said, if I had a bad intention, good intention, that's what it matters. And to some degree that's true, but also at the same time that means society has to rely on individuals' integrity, but integrity is accountable with God. So the Exodus law is okay, everything justice. But then Jesus said, do more, give more, give more. It's almost kind of to take into account these difficult situations that an individual faces, to basically make people to act more mercifully in a sense, beyond establishing justice. I don't know.
So would it be fair to say, what you're getting at is, the law kind of says, here, I'm going to show you your greed. And Jesus says, now I'm going to show you how to be generous.
And one thing you have to take into account
By saying, I'm going to care for everything.
is a lot of these laws were put in place because this was 2 million people out in the desert with limited resources. And you know how mob mentality goes, so if something wrong happened to you, you get on. Like you said, who do you take, the person you know or the person you don't? You can have a big fight, it can get really bad really quick, people are fighting each other, and ultimately it's like you said, you struggled a lot, you barely had it, but God took care of you ultimately. You're alive, you're healthy, your mom. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it's keeping that faith in God. And I think when Jesus said, if he wants your coat, give it to him. I'm going to take care of you. You know, if I take care of what's that verse?
The sparrows.
The sparrows and this, that, you know, how much more am I going to take care of you?
They're the flowers, lilies, and something. I mean, I also think it's Jesus is just so amazing in how he just the full perspective of everything. I feel like the more forgiving and generous you are and stuff, I look at like you see the Acts, the way they lived in the book of Acts, and how Paul's always like, you know, give, you know, work hard, do, you know, stuff like that, because we're meant to be community and give to others and stuff. And if we're doing all that, there's not going to be, if a need arises and I see your need and I fulfill it, then there's no, you're not going to need to steal. So like being, I mean, obviously in a huge, you know, societal thing, we have to have rules, you know, and stuff like that, and you know, all that. But like taking care of our communities and our people and the people we are in relationships with can also help that, for people not to even go down that road. Now they can't be given every single, you know, but you know what I mean? Like if we treated others the way God provided for us and taught our children to do the same, I think there would be a lot less stealing in the sense of need stealing. Now greed stealing is a whole nother category, but need stealing. So I think it's like you said, like if someone sins against you, he wants you to be forgiven. It's not our job to take vengeance or get revenge. God takes care of all of that. So I don't know.
Anyway, that's a
Oh,
discussion.
sorry.
We're out of time, unfortunately.
I think that one was hard.
It was. But everybody had such great, like, they contributed such great thoughts. I mean, I feel that this whole thing is amazing. I've missed this.
Yeah, but ultimately it's, like I said, giving away the cloak. It's okay, fine. Jesus is going to take care of me. Take it if you need it that bad. But anyway, let's close in prayer. Where are we going? Father God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this group of people. Thank you for the discussion. May we listen to your word and apply it to our lives and go out there to the world and be your lights and examples and take this discussion and help us become stronger. And be with all our prayer requests we have, all the struggles we might be going through today. And help us just have a good week and be examples to you. Amen. Amen. Or be examples.
Oh my gosh.